Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome back to the Storytellers Guild. My name is Max. Today we are going to be continuing our first season of Let's Write. This is a short story, a detective story called Detective Duncan, Watercolour, the Case of the Missing Locket. This series is intended to give you some insight into the writing process and also encourage you to do what I am doing, which is sitting down and writing every day. As always, we are doing the most important part of it. We've sat down to write. That's all it takes. Creativity is a muscle. You just have to keep flexing it, and it'll get stronger. It'll get better. You'll become a better writer. So we're doing that today, and I have a bit of liquid inspiration here with me. It is just a water bottle, but I have been dehydrated all day. It was a big day at work, so I'm trying to play catch up. And we are going to be working through the next part of this scene. So I've already gone through the last bit of the last scene, and I encourage you to do so as well, just to kind of catch yourself up on where we are. Feel free to pause the video, and then we'll dive right into it, okay? So when last we left off, the angered Duke was working his way out of the crowd to accost this group of policemen who've come up to the noble's quarter to help work on this crime, effectively to help him. And he's being rude to them. He's saying, who brought these filthy animals into our pristine neighborhoods? And this ties back to the screams you heard earlier about, up here at the top where it says, screams cut through the hubbub, because it wasn't like the police coming that caused the screaming, it was the animals, it was the horses, because the noble's quarter doesn't ever have horse poop in the streets, and that's something that, back in Victorian times was pretty common. So, and obviously this is a sort of alternate reality, but it's still the case that like these fancy people don't really have a sense of what dirty, sort of healthy, normal behaviors are, and poop is very much a part of that. So he's going to say, what do you mean bringing these filthy animals into our pristine neighborhoods? And I think last time, before we continue, I want to just pause and make a little bit of a tangent and say that I am not sure that I spent too little time on introducing the characters. I think the concern is that I spent too much time. I told you early in the series that I could be pretty wordy, so I think this might have been a bit too much just to introduce 3 characters, but I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see where it goes, and I'm really going to try to move into the action today to kind of keep the pace going, keep the words going, because the word count right now is at about 812, and most short stories wind up being between sort of, I think, 2,000, 3,000, and about 20,000. So we're almost a 20th of the way through this process, and we need to really get into the action and to set the stage here and make things happen. So I'm going to do that. But first, I am not going to let the Duke get away with this rude comment. I'm going to have, I was wondering like which character should have a comeback, because I think each character could have a really fun comeback. The junior officer could say, do you want me to shoot? Do you want me to, hit him with my baton, ma'am? The officer, detective Duncan could say, well, the only animal I see here is the one before me. And instead, what I elected to go for, because I don't want I don't want the headmistress's subordinates to seem unruly. I don't want them to seem like rabble-rousy. I want them to be very calm and collected, and more calm and collected than the rich people. So I think I'm going to let the headmistress take this one, and I think both of her subordinates in the police force would allow her to take this one because she's the boss and she's present, she's in charge, and they trust her to handle it. So I'm going to say, and this is where I start introducing the characters, right? So the headmistress towered over him. Cupped, feathered hat, cupped neatly under her arm. I assume you mean you are referring to the horses in our company, and not my police officers, and not my officers. Is that correct? Not my officers. Because I want her to be like implying that like the noble is being rude, right? Because in the noble's quarter, being rude is also seen as rude, because like high society and stuff, you have to like adhere to strict fashion, and you have to keep up appearances, right? So I assume you were referring to the horses in our company and not my officers. I would hope, maybe I would hope, instead of I assume, I would hope you're not my officers. Is that correct, Duke? And this is, I don't think I gave him a name. Did I give him a name up here at the top? And this is something you can always do too. Like, don't ever be afraid to scroll up. Like, this is Duke Everglass. Right. The Duke stopped short. Seinfeld reference for all of you out there. Stopped short. And rubbed his nose with a large finger and sighed deeply. Of course not, headmistress. Headmaster. Not headmistress, headmaster. I'm intentionally choosing not to make it gendered here. I think it's more fun if it's just a headmaster, because a master can be a man or a woman or a non-binary person, right? So anybody can be a headmaster. It doesn't matter how you identify gender-wise. But I want that to be like your head. You get promoted and you're a headmaster, and it also implies that like there have been other headmasters too, because the Officers Guild in this world is equitable, or tries to be. So the Duke stopped short, rubbed his nose, and sighed deeply. Of course not, headmaster. And now this is the part where you think about what the character looks like, and picking a name. And I'll make a whole video on picking names in the future, because I think naming is a lot of fun. But some people really get hung up on it, right? And so if you're worried about it, you can just like do something like this and say headmaster, headmaster, right? And just like recognize that that's an insert for the character's name, and you can come back to it. Like, don't let it stop your story. Like, you have an idea of this character and the name will come, right? And so for me, when I think of this headmaster, I'm really reminded of Amelia from Treasure Planet, right? This tall, proud, dignified captain. One of the words I was trying to think of in the last video was imperious. She is imperious, and she really carries herself nobly, more nobly than many nobles. I won't say most, because there are a lot of nobles who carry themselves nobly and also behave nobly. But the Duke is not one of them, right? So we're going to say, of course not, headmaster. And I'm just going to go with Liana for now. I like that name. I think it works well. And we'll see what happens. And maybe I'll make it a bit different, because it's like a different world, right? And so like Liana is like a British pronunciation, right? And so instead it can be Liana, and it's like this feels a little bit different, a little bit unusual, and so it reinforces the idea that you're not just in our world, right? So apologies to you and your officers, but when he says it, he's intentionally speaking to her, right, and not to the officers. He wouldn't say, I apologize to your officers. He would say, I apologize to you and your officers, because he's speaking with her. He wouldn't dream of speaking with the officers directly. So we'll say, but not my horses, interrupted the headmaster. The Duke's eyes flitted nervously over the assembled crowd of peers. His assembled crowd of peers, right? Because over his assembled crowd of peers, because he's making his decisions based on the idea that he is being watched, right? That he is, that's that social status thing we were talking about. So, flitted nervously as versus assembled crowd appears. He licked his lips. Apologize. Your horses did not find more welcome here. Headmaster. Our nobles, our knights, will see to their care immediately. A couple of hesitant, and this is just like a little aside scene. It's humorous, it's fun, it paints the picture, reinforces the distance that the nobles have from everyone else's world. A couple of hesitant knights arrived to lead the horses away from the carriage. The horses away. I'm not gonna bother. I'm gonna see it's implied because I really do want to get to the action. I started this by saying it was the action, and you can see that I've already gotten several interactions in, and I'm not even allowing action to happen. So we need to back up and do that. So let's say our next, we'll see to their care immediately. He waved a hand, and a group of knights arrived, led the handsome creatures, well-groomed creatures out of the street. I hope their husbandry skills no, I was gonna say I hope their husbandry skills are better than their police skills, but the headmaster's not here to make enemies. She's here to do her job, right? So let's cut to the chase. Would you care to explain the situation to us, please, Duke? Your lordship. Dukes are like lords, right? So dukes are part of the House of Lords in this world, so we'll do that. Said Liana, her frosty eyes fixed on the victim. Because right now he is a victim, right? Like, we don't know that he's done anything wrong. The Duke's chin wobbled. And this could mean either one of two things, like he was like being dismissive or he's crying. In my mind, he's crying, but I think sometimes it's fun to let your characters do things that are a little bit ambiguous and to give the audience an opportunity to kind of fill in for themselves who they think the character should be. I think worlds are more fun when you leave a little bit of, gray in all the black and white, because it means that it's more, I don't know, it leaves more room for imagination, right? I've been robbed. Oh my goodness, I've been robbed. Was taken. A keepsake, very dear to my heart. It holds no real monetary value. youngest. We're coming up on our time, so I'm trying to like get to a point that feels healthy to end it, because I want to make sure like at the end of every episode that we like leave on a note that feels like, okay, this bit is done. Youngest officer was scribbling in her notebook. Side the Duke. He looked around again. Priceless. So what he's doing, what he's doing is this is obviously, we know it's not valuable, right? It's just emotionally valuable. But in the crowd, in everything, he wants to save face. He doesn't just want to say, someone took my fluffy bear, right? He wants to say someone took something from me. It's priceless. And now the officers are like getting to work and doing their thing. What object? Inquired Liana. Said Liana. It's important not to use too many fancy verbs when you're using conversation, right? Conversation has always felt pretty natural to me. I know a lot of people struggle with it, but it's mostly just like, for me, we'll do another video about that too. But for me, it's about just like kind of sitting in a room with the characters while they do their job, right? You're just sort of like staying out of the way. So, what object? Said Liana. Why don't the three of you come inside and we'll talk about it over a nice hot mug of tea. Right, and it's not a cup of tea, it's a mug of tea. Just a little difference to like make the world feel a little different than ours. Liana nodded gracefully. Liana inclined her head. We would be honored, Duke. Honor here, whispered Detective Duncan to the only officer here, and this is where we give the junior officer her name, and we say, Eps or Meps or Trist or something short and punchy and fun, because this junior officer is quick and she's no nonsense, and she's desperately trying hard to follow the rules and do her job and be good. Quinn. Let's go with Quinn for now. And what do we say here? Because he's trying to like not only encourage her but also like teach her a lesson. He's in a job well done. Don't forget that. And don't let them put their sugar in it. In the tea. It's awfully sweet. Ruins the flavor. Ruins the flavor. So in this, we do a number of things, right? We show the relationship that Detective Duncan has with the young officer. They've got some rapport. He feels comfortable confiding in her. He's trying to keep her head on straight because this is a big, illustrious job in the Noble's Quarter, right? And he's also sort of reinforcing, well, he's encouraging her to take care of herself, which is obviously very important, but he's also showcasing the difference in the quarters and how much, what kind of sugar they use and how much they use and stuff, and it just sort of highlights again the disparity that exists in these groups. The young detective nodded. The young police officer wrote that down, wrote all of it in her notebook. All of it in her notebook as they followed the Duke into his through the grandiose gates of his estate. And I really like buttoning things up at the end and making sure that like this is kind of like a mini chapter, almost like a little episode. And so we've had the introductions, we know all the characters' names now. Did we? Did I? Whispered the detective to the young officer. That's right, because his name hasn't been written yet. Hi, Duncan. She winked back. Eyes on the job. Facts, eh? Eyes on the people. So this isn't Sherlock Holmes, so we're not going to say eyes on the facts. We're going to say eyes on the people, because the individuals in this world, in this story, are going to be the ones who drive it. So I want to make sure that we're like, establishing this as something different than just another wannabe Sherlock Holmes. It is. It absolutely is. But I want it to be something a little bit more fun too, a little bit different, a little bit more playful. So we'll leave it there for today, because that's definitely a lot, and we're definitely well over time. But I appreciate you joining me today, and until next time, I hope you aren't afraid of the white space at the bottom of the page, because it's nothing but opportunity. And we will continue to seize that opportunity next time. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'll see you again soon. Take care.